Everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about the area of the body that's involved in almost every upper body movement, the shoulder complex. Whether you're an athlete looking to improve performance or someone dealing with shoulder pain, we've got you covered. In this video, we're going to break down the anatomy of the shoulder complex, talk about some of the most common shoulder injuries, and then show you the 5 best exercises to improve shoulder mobility, decrease pain levels, and boost your overall performance. Let's get started. Before we dive into the exercises, let's take a quick look at the anatomy of the shoulder complex. The shoulder is made up of several joints and muscles, all working together to provide a huge range of motion while also keeping the joint stable. The main structures that make up the shoulder girdle includes the glenohumeral joint, which is the bow and socket joint that allows your arm to move in all directions. Then we've got the scapula, which is the shoulder blade, which moves along the back to assist with shoulder motion. We've got the clavicle or the collarbone, which connects your shoulder to your ribcage and sternum. And let's not forget about the muscles that control all of these bony landmarks. We've got the rotator cuff muscles, which include the supraspinatus, the infraspinatus, the teres minor, and subscapularis. These muscles are responsible for stabilization of the shoulder joints and not just rotation. If you want to learn more about the supraspinatus and the infraspinatus and all the other rotator cuff muscles, I've got a video on my channel that you can always refer to. Okay, and then we're moving into the deltoids, which are the large muscles that cap the shoulder and help lift your arm into adduction mostly, and obviously flexion and extension. The trapezius is next. We've got the rhomboids, serratus anterior, which control the scapular movements and play a big role in overall shoulder health and stabilization. We've also got some of the big players, and the first one is the pectoralis major, which is a very important big mover in the upper body and is also a very powerful muscle. And finally, the latissimus dorsi, which is the biggest muscle in the upper body and the only muscle in the upper body that connects an upper limb to your pelvis. Make a note of that because that's really important. Okay, the shoulder has the greatest range of motion of any joint in the body, but that also makes it prone to injury. Some of the most common injuries we see in the shoulder are injuries such as rotator cuff tears, and these occur when one or more of the rotator cuff muscles or tendons are torn or essentially inflamed, often due to overuse or trauma. We've also got shoulder impingement, and this happens when the tendons of the rotator cuff get compressed during overhead movements, which leads to pain and inflammation. Obviously, dislocations in the shoulder when the ball of the shoulder joint comes out of the socket, which can happen from fall or trauma or any kind of sports hit or activity like that. But don't worry, by working on your shoulder mobility and strengthening the right muscles, you can reduce the risk of injury and even alleviate existing pain. Now, knowing all of this, let's jump into the 5 best exercises to get your shoulder moving better, feeling stronger, and performing at its best. Here are the 5 best exercises to improve overall shoulder mobility, decrease pain levels, and improve performance. First of all, we're going to start with the end range mobilization first angle variation. Okay, so as you can see in this video, I'm lying prone or face down onto the bench there. Now, this is allowing me to essentially really pull my arm up and kind of going backwards there. So I am using a very kind of light to medium resistance band there, as you can see the green one from up above there, and I've kind of attached it around the middle of my palm. So I'm not really holding on to it, I'm not squeezing hard. As you can see from my hand there, it's kind of attached in the middle, so it's more like it's being hooked onto my hand rather than me kind of holding onto it, if that makes sense. If you don't have the mobility or the flexibility in your pectoralis muscles to kind of be in this position as I am there, then you're going to work in the range that you have currently available. That's very important. So don't push yourself to go into a range that you're not ready to go into. And that's something that a lot of people try to overdo sometimes when they're doing these mobility exercises. They try and get into certain ranges that they're not really kind of able to go into at the moment, but eventually you will be able to. That's the whole point of this. Now, there's a few reasons why you can't go into these ranges, and one of them will be lack of flexibility potentially in the muscles, but as well as lack of mobility in the shoulder joint. Now, it's very hard to say which one precedes the other one, and that's why we kind of work on both of them at the same time. As you can see, instead of you kind of stretching the pec there, you are doing very small, kind of almost jerky-like movements, but you're not really creating too much movement there, allowing your body to relax into this kind of new position. So every time you achieve a new end range, you can go beyond that end range by creating these so-called peripheral joint mobilizations. Now, if you've been to a therapist or if you're a therapist, you would have probably heard this term before. I am using the same principles here, but instead of somebody doing it for me, and obviously most of those peripheral joint mobilizations are kind of done passively with, for example, the client's leg or arm passive. But here, obviously, you can't do that. So I am my arm is in an active position, but I'm trying to relax as much as possible. That's really important. So you are creating those little movements there, and over time, the shoulder will kind of respond to this, and the pec will also relax and allow you to go into a deeper range. And then we're going to move into the second exercise, which is called Around the World. Now, this is my absolute favorite mobility drill because this takes care of so much stuff. You're not just working on the entire rotator cuff group there, you are definitely working on the pec major as well as the pec minor and the latissimus dorsi as well, because you are creating every single movement available to the shoulder joint. Okay, so from flexion, extension, internal or external rotation, all these kind of movements, adduction, abduction, you know, all these movements are being in a way created in this kind of whole series of movements. And again, I'm doing this prone or lying down because I want to make sure I can really isolate the arm whilst creating the movements. As you can see, this exercise precedes the first one because now you would have achieved a certain end range or a certain mobility level, and then you can really move into these kind of rotational movements now. So before it was mainly focusing on that adduction and abduction type of movements with a little bit of flexion there, but now we are focusing on the rotation. As you can see from this movement here, you've got that internal rotation and then external rotation, which means that you are primarily targeting those rotator cuff muscles. Okay, so especially the infraspinatus, which is the external rotator of the arm, and the subscapularis, which is the internal rotator of the arm. This is also a really good exercise for the scapula or the shoulder blade because you are allowing that to move through every single kind of angle that it possibly can move. You know, don't forget that the scapula is a floating joint. So if you didn't know that, you know it now. Make a note of it, which means that the scapula glides over the rib cage, and this is exactly what you're doing here. Sometimes the scapula can kind of accumulate tension underneath it's kind of between the scapula and the rib cage, and this exercise will allow you to essentially, you know, get rid of those restrictions or whatever else is kind of being stored underneath there. Moving to the end range mobilization angle number 2, we are doing exactly the same kind of technique here, so the peripheral joint mobilization, but in this variation, you've changed position. So now, instead of you doing it from more of a adduction kind of point of view, because before I was lying, you know, sideways and my arm was kind of creating that kind of adduction, so my pec major was working a lot more there. Here, you are really targeting the extension, which means that the main muscle that we're after is the latissimus dorsi. That's very important, okay? Now, by creating these small movements, you are taking care of something that bothers a lot of people, and that is the extension. So a lot of people have trouble like extending their arms above their head. So if you are a swimmer and you've got these type of issues, then this exercise will be great for you. And it's not just about increasing that kind of end range, you're also creating activation. So every single movement that you do with the arm down, you're trying to engage the latissimus dorsi, and that's one of the reasons why I've got my fingers on the muscle there. So I'm actively trying to increase the connection between the muscle and my brain, which is also something that's very important. That's proprioception, awareness, you know, the mind-muscle connection there. And then number 4 is the end range mobility angle number 3. Now, similar to before, but now you're standing up. Now, the only difference between this and the other exercise is that this could be a little bit more uncomfortable for most people, and this is why it comes kind of after the other one, because previously it would be pretty easy for most people to do the movements, the extension and then flexion movement from that angle that you were in before, whereas here kind of the tension is coming from behind you, which is a bit more of a hazardous position for the shoulder, and that's why a lot of people wouldn't really find this as comfortable as the previous one. But still a really good one, because this will really take you into those end ranges of shoulder flexion and the ability of your latissimus dorsi to resist that flexion by creating extension, so which is kind of moving the arm down. So every time you're creating like a pull down movement or a rowing movement, I tend to put myself in that end range, and then I create that pull down or the movement downwards, because that really engages the full length of the latissimus dorsi. And the final exercise that we've got here is the end range mobility angle number 4. This is something that I do for the pec major muscles. Now, if you have rounded shoulders, so if you are someone who struggles with like postural imbalances and stuff like that, this exercise will be really good because it really kind of allows you to first of all rotate. Now, if you notice, a lot of the other exercises didn't really allow rotation much, and that was the whole point. You're kind of locked in a certain position and the only movements were coming from the arm. Whereas now you have that kind of slight rotation of the thoracic spine, which opens up the chest and also puts a bit of a stretch on the pec major fibers, because now the sternum is coming this way and the arm is also able to kind of go further back, which is what's happening in the video here as well. This is going to be easier to do for most people because of that rotation, so that's why you can go into a further end range here. Okay, so you can really allow yourself to push backwards, and the whole reason why this is last is because people's pecs are usually pretty tight. So by this time, let's say you've done like all the other 4 exercises and you've spent 2 minutes per exercise per side, that would have been a pretty decent amount of time that you've spent essentially working on your shoulder joint mobility, and like all the muscles would have been warmed up by now. And now this exercise is just going to finish up the pec major, which is, again, like I said, one of the muscles that usually gets really tight for the majority of people. And there you have it, the 5 best exercises to improve shoulder mobility, decrease pain, and increase your overall performance. By incorporating these exercises into your routine, you can strengthen the muscles around the shoulder, improve flexibility, and prevent common injuries like impingement and rotator cuff tears. Remember though, consistency is key. Take the time to warm up your shoulders before you train and focus on both mobility and strength to make sure you're keeping your shoulder joints healthy and pain-free. Thank you so much for watching and being here. If you found this video helpful, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe buttons below. And if you want to hear more about injury prevention, muscle activation, and any kind of corrective exercise or strength work, make sure you put a comment below this video so that I can take care of that topic next time. Thank you again and see you in the next video.